So today we will talk about the book of Leviticus, and we'll be talking about chapters 1 through 9. Hopefully you will learn a little bit more about the law that was given to Moses and the actual practices and some of the restrictions or regulations around those practices and what they mean today to you. First, and as an individual, and then as a family or as a community, and then to us as a nation. Leviticus. So in chapter 1, we're told about the burnt offering. This is an animal offered entirely to Tatanzambi. It's a dedication to the Most High. Go ahead and mute yourselves, guys, to avoid interruptions. Then in chapter 2, we see what is called a meal offering. Some versions say meat. Some versions say grain offering. This is an offering of thanksgiving and dedication to Tatanzambi. It's a symbol of service. Then we have a peace offering. The peace offering, the third one there, also an animal offered. It's to show fellowship or to have fellowship with Tatanzambi and with others, the priests, the community. That's the peace offering. Then we have the sin offering, number 4, that you see over there. This was to cleanse us, or to cleanse Isolele from their sin and to reconcile them with Tatanzambi. And then you had the trespass offering, which was for what you would call reparation for specific offenses. This was to restore your communion with Tatanzambi, especially where you had transgressed deliberately. These are the main offerings that are presented in this chapter, in these chapters, chapter 1 through 9. Now, I will go a little bit into more detail, but not too much detail. The next slide might seem overwhelming, but bear with me. It's just to give you an overview of this next 5 chapters and to give you an introduction of what is going on. Okay. Take a moment, breathe in, breathe out. I know it's a lot. So what do we have here? On the left column, we have the chapters. Second column tells you the sacrifice, the type of sacrifice being presented. And then the third column tells you the role of the person offering the sacrifice. And then you have the role of Aaron's sons or the priests. And after that, you have the portion of the sacrifice that was given to Tatanzambi. And to the far right, not far right, but second last column, is the portion of the sacrifice that was given to the priest. And if there was a portion to be given to the offerer of the sacrifice, it's listed there. So with number 1, the burnt offering, I'll just go through this as an example and pick another one in the next slide. I'm not going to go through all of them because we'll discuss this. But for example, with number 1, the burnt offering, you had to give, if you're the one offering this sacrifice, you had to choose a male animal. It could be a cow, a goat, sheep, or if you cannot afford those, you can get a bird, which had to be a pigeon or a turtle dove. And you would kill this animal and then present it to the high priest. If it was a turtle dove or a pigeon, you would not kill it. The high priest would kill it. And then the whole animal would be burnt on the altar by the priest. If it was a bull, a goat, or a ram, the animal would be burnt, but the skin would be kept by the priest. That's what the skin, the skin is what the priest was left with. If it was a bird, nothing was left. Everything was burnt. And you, as the person offering this, would remain with nothing. It all went to the Most High. That's why it's called burnt offering. All of it is burnt except the skin that is kept by the high priest. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the rest of them. We'll discuss this in detail. But the other ones, number 2 is the meal offering or the grain offering. Then there was the peace offering, the sin offering, and the sin offering was in various forms. There was the sin offering by the priests, the sin offering by people in Isolele, rich or poor. They would bring different types of animals, depending on the means they had. And then there was the guilt offering. Okay, let's look at what are some of the other items presented in chapter 6 through 9. Now here we see almost a repeat of those offerings we've just talked about, but then here is where they're being applied in terms of the law. So you have the burnt offering, and this is how the priests were supposed to handle these offerings as the people presenting these offerings to the Most High. That's why you see they're mentioned as the law, the law, the law. It's the same offerings, but it's how the priests did them. So, for example, the first one, the burnt offering, which I just told you about. The role of the offerer, this is the priest. So nobody else is bringing this burnt offering. It's the priest who's doing this. He's bringing that as a burnt offering, especially like if he has made a sin. The priest keeps the fire of the altar burning continuously. So they keep putting these burnt offerings on the altar. They keep burning them. They don't let the fire burn out. They do this overnight. They do this continually for 7 days. And they burn the whole animal. Okay, this is how they had to do it. There's the meal offering in chapter 6. We'll get down to some details about it. This is the one where you could bring some grain, some fine flour, or you could bring some cakes or wafers. I think the Catholic Church stole the idea from there. That's why they still have those wafers. Anyway, we'll talk about that in detail. But let me go down a little bit more to number 8 down here. This was the ordination. This was when Aaron and his sons were being ordained as the high priest, or the priests. Sorry, not high priest, but the priests. So Isolele brought the offerings for ordination, and Moses was there to receive them. Moses acted as the priest, and he performed several things according to how Tata Nzambi had instructed him to perform that ordination. He had cut up pieces of meat of the animal and put them on the altar and various other things. But there are various portions that were offered to the Most High. Any of the meat that was not offered to the Most High, especially the non-fatty stuff, when you read in the details here, you'll see that, things like the kidneys and the fat around the kidneys, the fat portions of the meat basically were offered to the Most High. The remaining pieces of meat were boiled, not burnt, not barbecued. They were boiled and eaten by the priests, by Aaron and his sons, within the confines of the tabernacle. They could not take this stuff home. Very strict regulations. In fact, by the 3rd day, you could not eat any of the remaining meat. You had to get rid of it. Maybe that was for health reasons. I don't know. And in chapter 9, we see Aaron and his sons performing the full sacrificial duties for the first time on behalf of Isolele in order to sanctify Isolele. So Moses first ordains Aaron, and then Aaron and his sons perform the sacrifices thereafter in chapter 9. Okay, that's it. Now let's get into some discussion.